Thanks, Beth. Hey, everybody. This is Sarah Glova. I am today's moderator, coming to you from my son's Batman bedroom because it's the place in our house right now that gets the best Wi-Fi and lighting. So can't wait to see some of the exciting backdrops that our panelists have. Oh, good. We've got some Batman lovers. My son will be excited to hear that. So excited for you to hear from our panelists today. I feel like I am going to burst with all of the motivation and inspiration that I've collected already today, and yet we still have more great things to come. The focus for today, looking at entrepreneurship in this lens of radical collaboration. And I have to say, if you had told me 10 years ago when I started my company that I could hear from the women that you're going to get to hear from today, I would have been over the moon. And you know, here I am 10 years later, and I know that I'm still going to walk away with some amazing tidbits from these women. I've had a chance to talk to each of them before the panel, and I'm just really looking forward to what they're going to share with each of you. Something that's been inspiring to me today as I've been participating in the conference is how active the chat sessions have been. I don't know if that's something everyone else has noticed, but everyone who's participating is doing such a great job of adding their questions and feedback to the chat space. So I thought as something different today, if you're participating in this session, if you joined to talk about entrepreneurship, can you let us know why? Why are you interested in this? Are you currently an entrepreneur? Are you thinking about being an entrepreneur? Are you interested in entrepreneurship or the idea of one day starting your own company or working with a startup? Let us know what your interest is and what you're hoping to get out of the panel. We'd love to hear that, and I can try to integrate that into some of the questions that we have today. So while you're doing that and thinking about why you're here, let's hear from who is here. We do have to give a special shout out to our missing but here in spirit panelist. So we had a panelist who had agreed to join, Liz Chang, who is with NC State University. She is a rock star, so much so that she's actually been called up to support some communities in need in relation to the coronavirus and some things that the pharmaceutical board in our state is working on. So she wasn't able to be with us today, but she hates to miss it. And she actually invited me to let all of you know, if you have any questions for her or want to connect with her, you can reach out to her directly. And in the chat space, I'm going to share her LinkedIn profile. There you go. So if you'd like to connect with her, she would really welcome that. So she's going to be our panelist in spirit today. But let me introduce the rest of our panelists who are here. We'll just go one at a time, and I'll ask each of our panelists to just quickly say who they are, what they're working on, and why they're on this entrepreneurship panel. So Emily, if you're here, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Neville, and I'm also working from my house today. So, you know, you are seeing the top half of me. Just be mindful of that. Yeah, but great to be here. I'm the founder and CEO of Reborn Clothing Company. We're about 2 years old now as a startup. We transform surplus branded apparel and premium textile waste into innovative, enduring products for every lifestyle. So we'll get more into that, but working with a lot of universities, have grown from, you know, a team of just me to over 16 employees now. So definitely had a lot of experience and mistakes throughout the past 2 years.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Looking forward to hearing more from you. Normally I get to see you in person over at HQ Raleigh sometimes, but it's nice to see you virtually.
It's great.
Sabrina, would you mind going next? Oh, you might still be muted. Let me see if I can help you there. There we go. You want to try again?
Now.
There we go. We can hear you.
Awesome. Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina. I graduated from NC State Full College of Management in 2015. Upon graduation, I worked for a company called Cisco. I was there for about 5 years, and then I left corporate life to start my own thing. Long story short, I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more, but I lived in a Jeep and I traveled to national parks, and from there, I started like a lifestyle blog of living in a Jeep full-time going to parks, and I have now transitioned to my business is called You Me in the Park. So it's an education platform for national parks and having a more diverse perspective on history and the lands. And I no longer live in a Jeep, I live in a van. So I upgraded.
That's great. Thanks, Sabrina. Looking forward to hearing from you for sure. We have Carol as well. Carol, I see you there. Can you provide us with a quick intro?
Sure. My name is Carol Verrcellino, and I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called Oak City Labs. And so we started our company a little over 5 years ago, and we do custom software development, primarily in the life sciences and healthcare space. And so hopefully our clients are going to weather this pretty well this year. We'll find out. But my background is I started out thinking I would be in business and got into computers, taught myself how to code, automated parts of my job, worked my way into several software as a service startups here in the area as a Linux systems engineer, and worked my way up through management and was the director of software engineering before starting Oak City Labs. And, you know, we've been really fortunate. We've got a good culture, a good core team, and we've got a network of freelancers that we use, and it's been a lot of fun. And I'm also the mom of 3 kids. One of them is roaming around right now. So if you see me looking off to the side and giving somebody these eyes of quiet, that's why.
Definitely been there. I bribed my son with some serious Minecraft screen time, so I don't think we'll hear from him, but I'm very aware right now that the door is behind me. So who knows, he could pop in, but hopefully he'll give us some time here. It's kind of the new reality, and so proud of this conference and everything that the women have done to put this together really on such short notice. It's been a fantastic day, and we'll try to keep that going. Some of the things I noticed in the chat as we were doing introductions, that the women who are joining us today, I shouldn't say just women because we have both women and men in the conference, but women and men who are joining have posted that they're interested in entrepreneurship. That's a key one. Some have posted that they're already an entrepreneur. And then we had some people post that they are interested in entrepreneurship, which is this fabulous new term we're hearing recently, where you bring the entrepreneurial mindset to whatever role you have, whether you're an entrepreneur for your own business or whether you're working in a team and you want to have that entrepreneurial mindset. So we'll try to keep all of that kind of at the forefront as we talk today. And then I did see someone posted about a B Corp, so we can talk a little bit about that too. So keep your content coming. We have a wonderful facilitator who's going to help us. Rachel Haynes is in here, and she's going to help us flag questions. So Rachel, we can give it over to you here in a little bit. But let's get started with some content for our panelists. One of the first things I wanted to bring up in the session this morning, Grace, when she did her kickoff, did such a good job of reiterating that we stand on the shoulders of giants. There are women who came before us who did so much to get us to where we are today. And how that relates to entrepreneurship, something I love to bring up, is the idea of financing. So if you were a female and you owned your own business back in 1987, you could still be required to have a male relative, so a husband, a father, even a son, to co-sign on your loans. So that meant even if you were 100% owner of your business, maybe you owned a floral shop and you needed to have a lease for a van, the bank could require you to have one of your male relatives co-sign on that. And it wasn't until 1988 in the Reagan administration when that became illegal through HR 5050. And the reason I bring that up today is because there were women in North Carolina in this region who directly advocated for HR 5050 for that change. And so much of what we have access to and are able to do today is because of actions like that. However, of course, we still see that when it comes to financing for business, statistically, women are just still less likely to be funded, to see investment resources, to seek investment resources, and to seek capital. So I wanted to talk to each of the panelists, if you don't mind, just briefly sharing with us, what has your financing journey been like? Have you come across any hurdles? What's your perspective on it? And you know, where are you today with that? What would you like to share with our attendees?
I'm happy to take a first go at this.
Great.
I'm in the middle of my 3rd round of investment financing. So from the very beginning, really have had experience of raising capital through priced equity rounds or convertible note rounds. And actually, I feel like I've been thinking about it a lot this week, and especially with my investors and business mentors, because we've definitely seen a stall in those abilities right now. And so, you know, I've had to question, what does it look like if you don't have that security blanket, right? Like, we're considering that it probably will be very difficult to even pick up a new financing round in, 3 or 6 months. And so that looks like really lengthening our run rate right now, cutting our burn rate, and just figuring out how to have more creative solutions to almost near like break even strategy, maybe, well, definitely a lot earlier than anticipated. But I think what it does make you do is question every investment dollar you bring on, which I haven't done so much now. Like I think in the beginning too, I kind of took for granted percentage ownership and what that meant. But, as we get more established as a company, and as you see like how you can, find different ways to finance, maybe really questioning that more and seeing like if we're able to do it on more of a cash flow kind of approach than, taking investment and having high growth, that maybe it will make me question down the road, how necessary it is to take on investment funding and how much of it we can do from just kind of more organic growth. So, I mean, I think that there's no kind of right way or one way. I've talked to people about many different approaches. I really like, taking on investment funding and growing at a really fast pace. And I think that's been exciting for our team to, hire people faster, to grow into new markets faster. But I also think there is that other side of it, which it can be difficult. There can be factors outside of your control. And so at any moment, you may need to change how you run your business. And ultimately, it is about running a business, right? And having that profitable company.
That's so great, Emily. Thank you. And you're right. There's no one right answer. So that's where it can get so tricky. And it's so helpful to hear from different perspectives as we're going through, because as you start a business for our attendees, or if you're running a business, there's no one path. There's so many factors to consider. And so it's really helpful to hear other women's stories and how they did it. Sabrina, anything to share on this one? Oh, looks like you're still muted.
Can you hear me now? All right, I got this. Okay, so I don't have too much more to add. I think my business personally is a lifestyle business, so I rely heavily on partnerships and growing my audience. A lot of my revenue streams come from like Amazon links and partnerships. So I think I can learn a lot from the ladies from a financing perspective, but as far as my lifestyle business, it is heavily on partnerships.
That's great, Sabrina. And I love that you're bringing up that term too. The first time I heard lifestyle business, I actually didn't know what that meant. And I thought that someone was telling me that I had like a mom blog, like it was like a business about my lifestyle, right? It was just the first time I heard that term. And all that term really means is there are different kinds of businesses. Some are built to grow to the point of eventually maybe being sold. You're thinking about an exit strategy. You're building to scale. And then there are some businesses that you're building for yourself to have your own income. And that is the goal. You're not necessarily building it to have some kind of exit. And so that's what that term, that's how I think of a lifestyle business. Would you agree, Sabrina?
You worded it perfectly. You worded it better than I would have. So exactly.
I don't know about that, but I think it's helpful because it's just different kinds. There are just different kinds of businesses. Mm-hmm. But I think something that's really important is when you're starting out to be thinking about which kind you're trying to develop, because I do think it impacts a lot of your strategies. Awesome. And Carol, what do you think about the whole financing thing?
I worked for several venture-backed companies, and so I've seen like the pros and cons of it, especially from like the hiring and management side. We would, at several of the companies, we would get a large influx of cash, and as a manager, you were kind of pressured to hire very, very quickly to spend that money. So a lot of times once you've raised around, it doesn't become your decision, as much. But I do think it has a lot of positives, especially if you're trying to get to the market very quickly and you need to scale up very fast. I think raising money can be a very, very good thing. It's obviously worked really well for Emily. So I think you just have to choose what you want. So as far as our company is concerned, the investors are me, right? So like it's a lot of personal savings starting in the company, and I'm very fortunate to be, a little bit older. So like I've had time to build up those funds. And then also just thinking long-term, like right now, we don't need the money, but we've secured like line of credit in case we need it. So I'm very thankful for having kind of those safety nets right now in case we have some customers that just need a little bit more runway on invoices and things like that. So it's like always trying to think ahead and around the curve and kind of keeping yourself so you can stay afloat.
Absolutely. And I think that that sounds very much like some of the best advice that I ever received, which was the time to need a credit line is not when you should apply for a credit line. You should have something like that as a safety net well before you need it. And so we were thinking about taking on a really big project, and I went to some women business owners I knew and talked to them about this client that I was working with that was considering net 90 for invoices, and that we couldn't invoice until after a certain deliverable. But it was this wonderful project that we really wanted to do. It just meant that we couldn't invoice anything until after we'd had a deliverable met. And then 90 days after that, they were going to pay us. So of course I was very nervous, asked for their advice, and they recommended, based on the financials I showed them, a credit line. And I was so thankful that we did that beforehand, because if I had tried to do that after, when we were strapped for cash and we needed this invoice payment, I likely wouldn't have gotten the same options that I was presented with when I went before I was ready. And another piece that was there was, I just walked into a bank and was like, hi, I need a credit line. And as you can probably imagine, didn't get much of a response. And the women business owners that I talked to said, you really need to have a relationship with a banker. And it's important as a women business owner to have a great relationship with a banker, probably a lawyer, and maybe a bookkeeper. And so that was one of the earliest relationships I had, finding a banker that understood a little bit more about my business and was on my side, and I was able to get a credit line. So all that being said, a lot of it is that network that you build. And so I'm curious, Emily, as you talk about being on your third round, and Carol, as you talk about how you've made these investment decisions, thinking about, a credit line versus other solutions, who have been the people that you've talked to about that? And is it things that you knew about before you started a business, or did you have to learn?
I completely agree. Relationship building is everything. And I think even when we're talking about financing, that a lot of times, it can be difficult because we've been talking to banks about line of credits, but I think they want to see normally a few years of operating. And so when you don't have that, and when you're personally very young and don't have much collateral, or like any, those are, kind of the harder things, and where I felt like, wow, I really, have to raise investment funding. But, even now as we get into long-term sustainable partnerships, you can talk to your partners about that. And especially now, I feel like, we're all trying to come out of this together. And so being able to have those conversations of, hey, can you give 50% down, or can we renegotiate these payment terms so that, we're able to buy materials or pay for labor or whatever needs to happen before, you're able to invoice them. So I think the worst thing, that people can say is no. So I would just encourage everyone, don't be afraid to ask. Nothing is ever necessarily set in stone.
That is so true. I love that. And I just want to reiterate it, because I remember telling someone how I was stuck with this customer where we were sending these giant invoices, but then we wouldn't invoice them again for another 6 months, and how it was really hard. And they said, why don't you just ask them if you can invoice them differently? You could offer them a little bit of a discount if you could invoice them more often. It was like a light bulb, like, oh, I can ask for that. You're right. The worst you're going to hear is no. Yeah. And it's okay to have that conversation.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely for the relationship building, that's where, having those relationships, it can be easier to ask, right? If you've been working with them and they know that you're good for your word, they know that they want the products, they can consider it, an investment into their, what they need to. So I think I was lucky to have some really great mentors early on that, told me this is the, best law firm to work with, or, you need a bookkeeper early on, or, these are the areas where you can cut corners, and here are the areas where you really shouldn't. And so I would say, always surround yourself with people who, are more seasoned than you or experienced in their areas of expertise, and then, really rely on them with those financial or business decisions.
Yep, that's great. Carol, anything to add about, the group that you had behind you when you were thinking about some of these financial decisions?
So I would say from the financial decision side, it was more like my spouse, and I've got a business partner. So it was, I went to state, I've got an MBA from the program there, but there's nothing quite like actually starting the business and doing it. And I think I learned so much. I learned a lot by doing and just going, oh, this is what we need. This is what we need to do. And I did have several people in my network who I would have coffee with who like had ran an agency before and got tons of advice. And so it was kind of always in the back of my head. And when we first started the company, I was fortunate to know folks that had ran software agencies kind of during the earlier recession, like in 2008 and 2009. And I've got pages of notes from just those discussions. And so, you know, some of those conversations have always kind of helped our decisions moving forward. Like, I'm very frugal. So like, you know, our expenses outside of our employees are pretty low, and, you know, we don't have a flashy office, that kind of thing. So you got, everything's got its pros and cons and has its trade-offs. You know, you don't have a flashy office, so you might not be in downtown Raleigh or downtown Durham. You might be on the outskirts, that kind of thing. So you got to figure out what the trade-offs are and what's important to you.
Yeah, and I think that relates to kind of what Emily was talking about with burn rate, you know, as we enter into times like these where it's not maybe as secure that there's going to be another funding round in the way that it might have been 6 months ago. And I love Sabrina's story about upgrading from the van to the Jeep, and, you know, just thinking about all the different ways to start a business. My company has always been self-funded. We haven't ever taken investment, but we have relied significantly on, in different times, loans and credit lines. And it has been so important for me. I've got the same thing, pages of notes from people who have shared how they did it and advice that they had. I unfortunately don't have an NC State MBA. I'm sure it would have helped tremendously. I was an English major, and so I really had no idea what I was doing. But I share that because anyone can start a business. I truly believe that. And the key is finding people early on who are comfortable talking to you. And Carol, I love your point that you went and talked to other agencies and other software development agencies, not viewing, you know, the other as competition, but really looking at it as these are people who have been successful, and what they do is a little bit different than what I'm going to do. So let me open myself up and talk to them and create some ally relationships. Also underlines that term Emily is talking about, relationships being so important. And so let's take the panel there a little bit. We talked about allyship a lot already today, but I think in entrepreneurship, it can take on a whole nother meaning. You have to have all kinds of partnerships in order to make a business successful. And Sabrina, you've already kind of mentioned the partnerships that you had to help when you started. Do you want to kick us off and just talk to us about what allyship or partnerships look like when you're an entrepreneur? Oh, I think you're still on mute. Sorry.
Got it. So for me, it's primarily how I run my lifestyle business. I could not run my business without partnerships. So I rely heavily on like digital communities. So there's other Jeep lifers, van lifers, digital nomads. And I think for me, a biggest thing I've learned is you don't like getting mentors and role models from like different industries are also helpful. It doesn't necessarily have to be from the digital nomad community. I still had a lot of mentors from Cisco when I worked there, and that proved to be really helpful because I think building relationships is a transferable skill no matter what industry you're in, and all the people you talk to. So for my personal business, building relationships with the national parks, with the government, with different tribal members of Native Americans, I can talk about that a little bit more later, and diverse people is really critical for me to build an educational platform that does encompass diverse perspectives on our national park system.
That's great. And I'm really excited to ask you a little bit more about that. Since you bring up some great examples of what that looks like for your business specifically, I want to use this chance to introduce Liz Tracy. She is another panelist who we are so glad that she's here joining us. She's with 40 Lab, but she has done so much for the entrepreneurial community in our region. And Liz, if you're comfortable, I would love for you to do a quick intro if you don't mind. And then we're talking about partnerships and the importance of having partners, allies, mentors, whatever you want to call them, as an entrepreneur. And so if you have anything to add to that, we'd love to hear from you.
Great. First of all, I'd like to apologize for being late. I just moved to a new house last week, and so Wi-Fi has been quite the adventure this week. But like Sarah said, my name is Liz Tracy. I moved to North Carolina 7 years ago to help launch HQ Raleigh. And during that time, I got to be a part of the lives of many startups, both with HQ and our corporate accelerator program, which was fantastic. And that's how I got to know many people on this panel. 2 years ago, I decided to go back to school for industrial organizational psychology. So kind of looking at the behavior behind decisions that we make. Because I was having similar conversations with entrepreneurs over and over again, and was kind of curious as to why people make certain choices that they do, and wanted to just go a little bit deeper in that. So it's been 2 years, and a lot of my research is with the business school, and in particular looking at women in entrepreneurship. So this panel has been great for that particular subject area. For me, I think in terms of connections and relationships, I echo Sabrina in that partnerships and relationships are so crucial. And I think one thing I was thinking about with this is how important it is to be thoughtful in that. We have to be really mindful of our introductions and who we think would be valuable to kind of pass along. When I think about conversations that I've had with a lot of women and business owners trying to kind of move their business forward, one of the challenges sometimes is people will throw kind of any type of introduction or any type of mentor their way, and that's not always necessarily productive, and sometimes it can be counterproductive, because what can happen is you end up spending your time with a bunch of people who might not really be able to move your business forward, and you're not able to spend that time on your company. And so I think one thing, just when we think about allyship and we think about relationships and we think about connection, just trying to be really mindful in those introductions, and sometimes reaching out to people beforehand to see if that introduction would be of value. So I think kind of that thoughtfulness and that extra step can go a long way as we think about supporting each other.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I've got a couple of thoughts on that, Liz, but I'm sure our panelists do as well. So Emily, you talked about the partnerships that you had kind of coming from being a student at State and launching to where you are now, and how that's scaled. So any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's kind of two sides to it, I guess, right? Like, one of my investors has told me before that he thinks one of the reasons why, like, I suddenly have these like kind of crazy opportunities in front of me a lot of times is because I'll just kind of take a lot of meetings and like see where they go. And he says that I entertain, a lot more conversations than he would probably, because it's just immediate kind of like, I don't have time, or I don't, but then I also have gotten into different partnerships or relationships where I saw that they were sucking time away from my efforts to build the business. And really, I think in the beginning too, you're kind of willing to do kind of anything and everything, especially from a cash flow standpoint. And then you get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm being focused, right? I understand my core business and what we're really excelling at. And so we need to kind of get rid of those distractions to really go in and focus and drive sales in a really powerful way. But I have gotten really awesome opportunities and mentors from kind of taking chances or, looking for more opportunities. And I think too, I really appreciate when people do that for me, because I think that sometimes people have not entertained, wanting to take, the time to talk to me about Reborn, or versus these larger companies who actually even now, I've been so grateful for the people this week who haven't canceled their meetings, and they're working for crazy large companies and definitely could just say this maybe isn't worth the time, but I think it really pays off for both parties when you do. So, have to be kind of your own judge of, depending on the partnership, or if you think it's going to be a time suck versus maybe something mutually beneficial. So yeah, kind of two sides to that.
That's really helpful. And I think it brings up again this idea of there's no one right answer to some of these questions, but I think there are so many opportunities out there. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, it's really hard sometimes to wear all the hats. I mean, all the hats. I mean, you're the tech support hat, sometimes you're the janitor hat, right? Like you sometimes are everything. And so doing some of what we did earlier this morning, that design thinking mentality around designing your life and thinking about your values, applying that to your business, being really, really intentional about where you want to go in the next couple weeks, months, and after that will help you make those decisions so that it's not just, oh, look, a good opportunity. It's very shiny. I'm going to go this way. And really making sure that it fits within whatever you're trying to work on can be such a huge help. And that'll also help you decide, where you want to offer that mentorship. So if you have people pinging you and saying, hey, I think I want to start a business. Can I talk to you? Just thinking about how you have time for that and how you can make time for that. There's so many great resources. Hopefully when we have a little bit of a different environment here in the next couple months, Raleigh's launching that Meet Me There series where people can actually invite, any invitation you get that's something like, hey, could you meet me for coffee and talk to me about starting a business? You can say, yes, I'm going to be at the Meet Me There event. And I think Innovate Raleigh and a couple other groups are pushing that out. So events like that, or hosting coffee chats, or doing different things to try to bring people together and have those conversations. I think it keeps us humble when we open ourselves up, being willing to talk to all different kinds of people. But we have to guard our time, because a lot of times as entrepreneurs, it can be the most valuable thing we have. I'm a little curious, Carol, if you don't mind me asking, it's a little bit of a different question, but as I'm thinking about partnerships and what you've built over the last couple of years, how do those introductions look for you when they're successful? So I imagine that people introduce others to you all the time, say, oh, you have to talk to Carol. She knows a lot about this, or she'd be a great resource for you. If I was going to make an introduction of someone to you, what should I do to make that a helpful one for you, and maybe make it one that you'd be more likely to respond to?
I think that's a good question. I think the best introductions I've had have usually had some information about why the introduction would be good. And even if it was because somebody's asking me for help versus the introduction is going to be beneficial for me, just background information in the email it's pretty simple. It's the introductions where it's like a one line, hey, you should talk. And then there's no information with it that makes it hard to discern whether before this, whether it would be a phone call or coffee. And much like Emily, when we were in the beginning stages of the business, like I took any meeting, like it didn't matter. Like I met with anybody and everybody, and I thought everybody was a potential client. And then as we built up the business and my time had more demands, I started learning how to kind of screen those things and figure out what would be best for the business and a best use of my time. But I think in the beginning, when you start a business, I think you should be open to like whatever comes your way. And I do find now that I almost always do a phone call first, just like hey, this sounds great. Could we do like a 15 or 20 minute phone call? And then I might do coffee after that.
Absolutely. And I've even seen people have a kind of a stair step where they first say, can you email me some of the questions that you're thinking about so I can be prepared? And then if the person emails back, then they'll do the phone call and then maybe the in-person meeting. That's great advice. Thanks.
Yeah. And I was going to add, just for like kind of that flexibility and adaptability for a young company. Like I do think that, there is a certain point where you do kind of get focused, and I don't know what that like right timeline is. I think it depends on how fast you're growing and where it's going. But I think one of the main reasons for our success has been that flexibility in the beginning and really like seeing how the market responds. And that's allowed us to say, right now is a great example, right? Like universities are closing. That's one of our like largest client pipelines, right? Which it's, we're doing a lot of creative things there too, but because we've have these different markets that we've been exploring in and testing out, our whole business isn't done with, And so I think you kind of see where if you are adaptable in the beginning and you're seeing like how you can be flexible and change, you're not, I guess the best way to say it is putting all of your eggs in one basket. But you're allowing for those maybe unforeseen opportunities, or the fact that like you're just realizing that you're still learning, right? And so as you're learning, you're going to learn so much more through seeing how your market responds than kind of having everything figured out in the beginning and closing yourself off to new opportunities.
That's such a great point. And I think is really, as Carol said too, really important in the beginning, especially as you're kind of forming things and figuring things out. But I think also maybe a helpful reminder that, we should always be talking to our potential customers, and customers might not be the right word for whatever business or organization you're looking to start, but customer, client, partner, whoever it is that you're looking to work with, we should always be talking to them and being willing to adapt and to think about, at the end of the day, we're establishing something, products or services or whatever it is, in order to meet someone's needs. So making sure that we're checking in and always making time for those discussions. And that's something I know as an entrepreneur, but also working with entrepreneurs, that I've given that advice again and again. It's easier sometimes to put your head down and work on your website or your business cards or your pitch deck or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, we've got to be having those conversations with potential partners, customers, and clients. Sometimes those conversations can be really sensitive. I know in our business, we've helped launch a couple of products that were of a little bit of a sensitive nature. One's a public one that we did as a Duke partnership, where we worked with women with lupus who were interested in becoming pregnant one day. And as you can imagine, there were lots of layers to that. And trying to find volunteers to talk to us about that was really difficult and took a long time. But we learned a lot from it about establishing trust and the right way to establish relationships. The reason I bring that up is, Sabrina, I wanted to ask you about the really unique partnerships that you've developed as you've worked on establishing your company, and kind of what that's looked like. And maybe we can use that as a way to talk about, some of those more sensitive conversations that we want to have with clients, or just establishing trust with clients and customers, what that can look like. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. As you were speaking, I'm like, a lot of my conversations tend to be sensitive. The conversations I have with the national park systems, I love the national park systems, and I found through my travels that the way that they're telling the history of the parks, I found they'll use terminology such as, we're preserving untouched lands. I'm half Navajo, Native American. So like, to me, I'm like, well, it wasn't. There were communities here. So having those conversations has been and continues to be very difficult. Just bringing in like my perspective to something that has already been established. Something that has continued to work for me is, practice, bringing in facts, bringing in other experts in the field, and being very open to having and engaging in the conversation to where it's being graceful and it's not attacking and it's not diminishing the work that has already been done, but a way to build upon it, to build a more diverse and holistic story of the parks. Yeah.
That was such a great response. I want to give the other panelists a chance. Did that spark anything for anyone? Awesome. One of the things that I wrote down that you said, Sabrina, was the work that's already been done. Pretty early on in my career, I got some feedback when I went into a board meeting, and I basically was like guns blazing, very excited to share all the things that I thought I could help to do to like fix and solve, and all the things I could bring to the table to improve. And as you can imagine, even though I was going with good intentions and trying to sell what I thought was, the solution that people needed, I was completely ignoring the work that had already been done. And I wasn't acknowledging, all the people in the room who had been working really hard and who probably wanted the same thing. And frankly, probably had already had some of the ideas that I thought were like so new and so great. It's just that people have a bandwidth capacity, right? Like there's only so much people can do. There were other limitations, who knows? And so instead of taking time to ask those questions, I just went in and said, here's what we need to do. Obviously not the right approach. And luckily since then I've learned, but would be curious to hear from the other panelists, just what that experience is like. And so thinking about, the work that's already been done, thinking about this idea of radical collaboration. I love that that's the theme for the conference. And a big part of it is not just collaboration of working together, but really embracing diverse perspectives when it comes to problem solving. So trying to take the time to listen to others and be inclusive in that. So we'd love to open up the discussion about that. Any panelists feedback?
I think for us, I knew from the very beginning, but like basically there's no single solution to textile waste. And this is a much larger problem than any one of us could solve singularly. So in realizing that, I've just seen again and again when you kind of, I guess, spread like positivity and, you know, refer people to say like, hey, we don't offer the best solution for you. Like being, I guess, radically honest with a client if like you're not the best solution for them, and instead saying like, but this person is. And, you know, I think actually we have so many partners now in the industry, even now, like I'm on this awesome email chain with a couple other like manufacturers in the textiles industry and partners, and like everyone is telling each other what they're doing right now to get through it. And like, I mean, it's just awesome to be a part of a community in that way. And I think if we had closed ourselves off or made it all about competition from the beginning, one, we would really be doing a disservice to like the amount of opportunities available, and again, the fact that we can't be the single solution to it. But then also in times where you really can, you know, lean on each other and help each other through this, you know, you want to have that community built. And so I think I've just seen where when you choose collaboration, not always, you know, but when you choose, I guess, collaboration over domination or whatever the opposite of that would be, like it normally, like you get back tenfold what you're kind of giving in return.
That's great. And Carol, that relates a lot to what you were kind of saying in the beginning, where, you know, you met with other agencies that were doing similar things and kind of asked for their feedback.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think just having a willingness to talk to people, and then also just like internally with your teams, or even if you're working for a company, is recognizing that everybody's a little bit different and they communicate differently as well. In my field, I've always worked with software developers and systems engineers and database engineers, and sometimes they can be a little bit more introverted and less likely to sit in a very large meeting and come out with their ideas right in the meeting. In fact, my business partner he's very much known for sitting in a meeting with me where I'm asking questions the entire meeting and talking the entire meeting. And then at the end, he has like the best question that everybody's like, wow, that question's amazing. And I'm always like, why wasn't that question earlier in the meeting? And he was like, because you had to ask all the other questions for me to get there, you know? And so like just understanding that each person brings a different thing to the table. And, you know, if somebody's quiet in a meeting, maybe they're just not comfortable bringing their ideas out on their own. Maybe they need somebody to ask them what they think.
Absolutely. And part of that radical collaboration is figuring out different ways to communicate with those different types of people. And Liz, I'm sure you've seen that as you've seen different organizations and different kinds of entrepreneurs. I mean, there's all different kinds of communication strategies. Would love to ask you a little bit about what you've seen. And then after that, just so that the participants know, I'm going to ask Rachel, our room moderator, to share some questions from the participants. But Liz, first, can you tell us a little bit, just what are some other successful communication strategies you've seen from different kinds of entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, building off of what Carol said, in terms of having kind of introverts and extroverts in a meeting, as our team grew at HQ, one of the things that we learned was when a meeting ended, that didn't mean that the conversation ended. And so being able to let people know that there was a time period post conversation that ideas would still be accepted. Because kind of to Carol's point, sometimes people need a little bit more time to process or don't feel comfortable in that moment to be able to share. And I think that was really helpful for our team in terms of collaboration and getting new ideas that might not come out in a certain setting. And I think the other thing too was kind of this idea of always redirecting, especially in the early days. If we maybe couldn't work with somebody right then, how could we connect them to somebody who might be of value? Never necessarily saying no, it was always a redirect. And I think that idea of redirecting can then come back around, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years later, to be really beneficial in potential future collaboration, because people know that you've been thoughtful and that you've taken the time to really think about what would be of value to that other person as well. So those are just a few things that kind of come to mind.
And that relates to Emily's point of, it's not competition. It might be, we're not a perfect fit for you, but here's who is. I love thinking about that as redirecting. And just a quick tie into what we were talking about with connections. If someone reaches out to you and says, I'd love 15 minutes for coffee to ask you about how you started your business, if you ask them, what are you looking for? you might find that you're actually not the best person for them to talk to, and you might be able to redirect them to someone else. Same if you get the opportunity to speak on a panel or join a board or do a volunteer mentorship. If I ask some more questions, and it might not be a no, it might just be a redirect. And if that helps to save you time and kind of keep you in line with where you're trying to go, but also help this person, that can be a great way to continue being supportive, but to be really protective about what it is that you're focused on. Really neat. Awesome. Rachel, if you don't mind, would you let us know, were there any questions that you wanted to bring up to the panelists that came from the Q&A chat?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you all so much for being here today, and thank you for the fantastic discussion and your lovely insights. One question we have so far from the audience is, what is the single biggest challenge that you faced when you started your journey as an entrepreneur?
I can start. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good. We can hear you.
Okay. So for me, my biggest personal challenge, honestly, was the transition from corporate to starting my own business. For me personally, it was my societal and social pressures. To be transparent, like when my parents or friends or members of my community asked me what I did, and I told them I worked for Cisco, whether they thought of the tech company or the food distribution, they had clarity of what I was doing, and they were really proud of me. And I think, like, particularly for my upbringing, I'm half Navajo, Native American, and half Bangladeshi, South Asian. And from both of those backgrounds, all of my accomplishments I had weren't for me, but for my family and my community. And just the background, my mom was born and raised on a Navajo reservation where a lot of her rights and freedoms were stripped when she was forced into boarding school. And my dad came to the United States from Bangladesh when he was 17. So I had spent a lot of my life having a strong sense of responsibility to prove to society that people that look like me, spoke like me, were valued more. So I guess my whole journey has been society, like, I'm valued something. So for me, it was a personal journey of viewing success differently, and it can be something unconventional, and that I acknowledge that I was the first person in my family in generations to break the norms of, I guess, radically creating my own place in the world rather than following suit as what society defined success to be. And that I had spent my whole life spending my life building my life around a job, and that I could spend, I could build a job around my dream life instead. So for me, it was a personal challenge of feeling like I had a lot of society, family pressures, letting that go, understanding that the definition of success can be different, and that my mantra, being a voice for unheard voices, could be told in different facets, and finding a way that I can actually be the most productive member of society is doing what I'm doing.
That's beautiful, Sabrina, and so helpful, because anyone who has told someone else that they're gonna, start their own business, do their own venture, anything like that, and seeing kind of that blank look of, you're gonna what? Has maybe felt that pressure, and maybe not the exact same way, but in some part of that. So definitely something relatable. Other panelists would love to hear from you on your biggest challenges. I do see that we might run a little bit close to the break. I will save the chat, and if I see anything that we can address, we'll be sure to try to send out some additional resources related to, how to meet a banker, what a B Corp is, and the advantages of that, and things like that. But Carol, Emily, Liz, anything to add on biggest challenge?
Sure. Okay, go ahead. I was going to say the biggest challenge for me was similar, leaving my job and a nice salary, and going from salary to absolutely nothing in a matter of days. It was actually a little bit depressing in the beginning. I was also pregnant, so that was, looking back, I'm like, it was a pretty dumb move, but it would be leaving a salary and then sales. Like, selling is not a natural thing to me, and it feels gross and weird. And that's still a constant challenge, right, with any business. So, go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about challenges all day, but I'll spare you all of the sob stories. Yeah, I mean, I think like it's really, really hard. And I personally like originally started my startup as more of a hobby or an extracurricular. I started it when I was 19 and a sophomore in college. And so it basically, because of how fast it grew and like its success, which has been fantastic, it definitely meant me not really having a college experience and working like 3 jobs in the beginning and like a lot of difficult, I mean, it's just been really, really hard, and a lot of work. But I think that what I've seen throughout all of that is the support that we have here in our community in Raleigh, and especially the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Raleigh. Like, love this city and the community here. And then definitely like the team that I've been able to bring on that just, also gets that. And I think there's also those transitions of like, even if you may not be a founder of a startup, but if any of you are working for startups or, I've also worked for other startups in the past, and it is like an unreal difference of work compared to like kind of an established career. And I sent out a team email, and I like often look back on this team email I sent. I think this was back in like November, where I feel like every few months I keep saying like, hey guys, like now we have to work really hard. And they're probably like, when does this end? But I had basically said like, boring structure comes soon enough. Like you get to be a part of this original team that we don't know a 9 to 5, like there's no established roles. There's a lot of work, but that will come soon enough. And we get to be a part of something really exciting that paves that way for that to happen. And ultimately what I've heard from everyone is that the 9 to 5 structure will come soon enough, and then you'll miss it. And this original start and how exciting it is.
Yeah, and I think to build off of that, Emily, as a founding team member of HQ, I was not technically one of the co-founders, but to be part of the energy and excitement that went along with developing HQ. And I think in the beginning, there's so much to do, and it's exciting and there's energy, but also the prioritization of what is most important to accomplish, because everything is so big and it feels like there's a million things that you want to do and you want to see the vision kind of unfold. And so having the patience to prioritize the things that are most important to get done, I think can be a really big challenge sometimes when there's so many things to accomplish in the beginning. And so kind of taking a deep breath and communicating as a team and really trying to bite off as much as you can chew, and then finding people around you that can support you so that you can kind of cut down on the time that sometimes it takes to do things when you've never done it before.
Yeah, and that could mean if you are an entrepreneur, solopreneur of one, making sure you have that team built up around you, maybe not necessarily employees or partners or mentors. It could be any kind of supportive group that you've built to help you through that. So vital as you take on that CEO hat. Well, we are out of time. I can't believe it. It went by so quickly. Can't thank the panelists enough for their amazing insights. Also want to thank Rachel and all the other team members who came together to help us moderate and run the room. A big thank you to the conference overall. It's been such a great day. I will try to go back to the chat and see if there's any other questions that we can identify, but I will say have had a great time meeting these panelists, and they're all very welcoming. So if you have a specific question, I'd welcome you to connect with them on LinkedIn. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.